In this video, I'm going to show you a proper way to set up the box container inside of Elementor V4. This is easy to work with for us humans and for AI agents if you're already working and building with AI, because without a good system, AI makes a mess even inside of Elementor. And there's basically two ways to do this. One is with two containers. That method is a little bit easier, but I also found a way to do it with one container. This is a little bit harder to set up, but it's a much cleaner solution. And it also works with V3 containers. So you can start using this system today, whether you have already moved to the Atomic Editor or not. Okay, let's get started. First, the basics. Why do we even need a box container? A box container simply means that your content doesn't stretch across the whole screen. On smaller devices, you don't have that problem because there is not a lot of space. But on desktop, it's important because full width text become uncomfortable to read. Therefore, on desktop, you always need to make sure that the content stops at some point, but not all types of content is the same. And so that's why you actually need multiple boxed containers. This was not possible in Elementor V3, by the way. But apart from your normal box container that you use for most of your sections, you also want a smaller one, because some sections need to be narrow because you want to make it comfortable for people to read. And some sections can actually be wider than the normal box container because it's more visual. And some sections you maybe even want to go full width, like a menu, for example. Another benefit of having multiple widths for the box container is that it makes your web design feel less boring, because in design, anything that's predictable is boring. So by having different widths, you're breaking up the boringness a little bit. So then the question is, what sizes should these boxes be? As some of you have seen in my older box container video from a few years ago, the default width that Elementor provides is 1140, but I discovered back then that this should actually be 1120 because it is based on a 12-column grid and 20 pixels of gap between those columns. Maybe Elementor did this because by default there is actually 10 pixels left and right in every container, but if you turn that off, which is what many people do, then it becomes 1140. And so the 1140 box container that you get by default is actually based on 12 columns that are 75 pixels wide. And 12 columns only have 11 gaps because on the outside there's no gap. And so that's why you don't have 12 gaps of 20 pixels, you have 11, totaling to 1120. And with this same math, you can then also figure out your smaller container and your bigger container. And so what you can do then is just decrease the size of the column to something like 45. And then the total becomes 760. That looks like this in Elementor, which is very comfortable to read. You can also do 50, by the way, but I like to use 45. And then for the wider content box, this is not for text, but for example, for big images like this, I increased the column size from 75 to 85, which then totals to 1240. So that's my boxed large, basically. But the bigger you go, the smaller that 20 pixels starts to feel. So sometimes I bump it up to 24 pixels of gap, and that then totals to 1284. And I usually don't go wider than that because a lot of laptop users are actually still on screens that are like 1366 wide. So if your box container becomes too wide, then the website starts to feel cramped on those screens. And this is not old data. I looked this up. This is 2026 data. And I want to tackle one more thing that is about 4K screens. Some people think that all of these sizes that I just showed you are still way too small because people are using 4K screens. And that sounds very logical, but almost all 4K screens, they scale up the content, because if you would actually watch a 4K on 4K, it will be way too small. And so you don't have to worry about the 4K screens. These sizes that I present right here for small, medium, and large are great on all monitors. Okay, so now that we have some numbers to work with, we can go to Elementor. I'm here on a fresh new install. So the first thing you have to know is that you shouldn't really start from the plus, because at the time of this recording, if you click over here, that is the old V3 container, this one. So if you want to work with the new V4 atomic flexbox, you should drag it on the canvas like that. Then let's start with the easy method, which requires two flex boxes. So the outer flex box, just make sure that we have a little bit of healthy space on the left and on the right. And then the inner flex box is actually gonna contain the fixed width. Okay, so what I recommend is to add 5% left and right padding on the outer container for the easy method. I just unlinked it and I'm gonna type 5% in here. I'm just typing it on my keyboard. It automatically switches, but you can also just click over here. Now you can already see that the box container appears, but this is based on percentages. This box is now 90% because we have 5 and 5 on left and right. But that is our save margin. Okay, and now I'm gonna drag in another flex box, and that's the one we're actually gonna give a specific width, the one that we want. In this case, let's start with the normal one, 1120. So now this box is 1120. You can quickly confirm that by checking your screenshot tool. That works. And since we want to reuse that everywhere, you can then turn that into a global class. For example, boxed-m. There we go. So now our inner box is set up, but it's actually better to use max width because that gives you a little bit more flexibility. Okay, then for the background flexbox, you also want to turn that into a class and then, for example, just call it section, because in this method, you're always going to have that background container and then inside you're going to have that boxed. And you also want to make sure it's always middle aligned on all sections. So you can do that over here, but by default, I want my containers to be a column and then these one switches. So you actually need to use align items plus columns if you want your default section to be vertical and your box container to be in the middle. So these are the things that I connect, and the 5% left and right are the things that I connect to my section. And you can also go a step further by also adding some default top and bottom padding. For example, 80 pixels, or even better, 5 rem. For the advanced users, you can even use clamp in here by going to formula and then adding a clamp function in here, because then your top and bottom padding automatically shrinks down on mobile. For now, I'm gonna keep it simple, keep it like this. So all of my sections automatically have some padding, some default padding. And if I want less or more padding for this specific section, I can always go back to local and then, for example, add 10 rem if I need that for that specific design. But at least you then have a system that you can use on the whole website. So on the inner container, our boxed medium, everything looks good. And if we would make the screen smaller, we would see that it also works because that 5% left and right that we set up on the section, it always makes sure that our box container is never touching the sides, which is perfect. And even if we go to tablet and mobile, you will see that 5% actually works really well. So you don't even have to change anything for tablet mobile and all the breakpoints in between, which makes this system really nice to work with. But we're not done yet. You also want something for your box small and box large. So I'm just going to duplicate my container and I'm going to delete that class. I want to add another class, which is going to be called boxed small. And on this one, I want to set up my 760. And there we go. So now we have a boxed small. That was super easy. Again, you only have to do this once for the whole website. And I want to do it one more time, creating a boxed large and then putting that on, for example, 1240. And now you're basically done, because if you want a full width section, then you don't even need an inner container because the outer container already contains that 5% left and right. So let's test it. I'm just going to give it some background colors so we can actually see if it has worked. Okay, let's go to the front end. They become a bit small because there's nothing in it. But now, if we start to scale this down, you'll start to see that the white one starts to shrink. Then we hit the 1120. And at some point we also hit the 760. And there we go. Beautiful. It goes all the way down to mobile. 5% looks good on all the sizes. And we have boxed for medium, small, and large. Is that cool or is that cool? So now I have literally set this up. If you go to your class manager, then you will see that your classes are here. You can, by the way, also rearrange them. And so in this website, if I have a new section, I just drag in a flexbox. I just say that this is a section background. It automatically adds 5% left and right and that top and bottom padding. You can, of course, also make different variants of sections. Then I just drag in a flexbox like that, and then I tell it what it is. So for example, boxed S. And there we go. Now I'm set up and ready to go. You don't have to touch the side settings anymore. You have 3 different widths. And if you want something full width, you just dump it straight into the section flexbox. Okay, so that's it for the simple system. Let's now move it up a level to the professional system where you don't have these inner containers. So I'm gonna start with a flexbox again. And I do like it to have some default top and bottom padding everywhere. So inside of spacing, I'm just gonna unlink this, and on the top, for now, I'm just gonna do 5R, 5R. So we have 80 pixels on the top and the bottom. And then on the right and on the left, we're gonna go to formula. And in here, you're gonna paste this one. This is a calculation that says there should be that same 5% left and right, but then you're going to do a calculation. You're going to check the 100% width of the browser. You're going to extract 1120 because we're setting up the 1120 here. You're going to divide that by 2 so that on the right side, you basically get half of the 1120 that's always sticking there. And so if you put this formula in here, then you can already see what's happening here on the right. There is a box and there's also that 5%. So let's also quickly paste that same formula over here. And then I want to convert this into a class that I don't call boxed. I just call section M, section medium. And here you can see it. I cannot use the background trick right now because then it will give the whole container a background. So in order to test this, I'm just dragging in a divider, which doesn't show up because by default, my section M should also be turned into a column. Okay, now I have a line, I have something to test with. So let's go to the front end and there you go. Now you can see that it works. Beautiful. All the way down to mobile, it's exactly the same, but then with one container. Unfortunately, we don't have a duplicate class feature yet. I am personally actually building a plugin that allows you to do that, which is hopefully coming out soon. But I hope this Elementor just adds this, because right now we just need to copy this manually. Then make another class called section L and then do the same thing. Then we're going to go to formula and then paste it here. But then for the section L, you of course want to change this number to, for example, 1240. Don't forget to do it on both sides. I'm going to add some top and bottom padding. Make sure to put it on column by default. And now we have the section L. So then you do the exact same thing for section small, where you just change this number to 760, and then you're done, except for one thing, because if you use this method, which I think is superior, then you need to add one more class, which is the full width one. I'm just calling it section full. And for this one, you then just need to add 5% left and right manually and also put it on column. Again, top and bottom padding is optional. You can also create separate classes for that. It really depends on how you want to work. I'm just adding it right here so I can see a little bit what I'm doing. Oh, and I accidentally set it up inside of margin, so always make sure to check that. So now I also have a section full that is just 5% all the way. And so if we go to the class manager again, you can see our new classes here. I still have to add the section small, but now we can use these classes in Elementor V3 containers. So that means that we're not limited anymore in Elementor V3 as well with only one box container. So let's drag in a V3 container. And now I'm gonna put this one on full width, but then in the advanced tab, I'm just going to add a CSS class, which is the one we just created, section M. And there you go. Now it's pulling the data from the atomic editor into the V3 container. Or if we want the bigger one, I'm just changing it to L. There we go. If we want the full one, I'm just changing it to full. This, by the way, doesn't work with all of the classes. I have already tested this because I was like, wow, that's so cool. It doesn't work with all widgets, but with this approach, with containers, it works. So this is another way to already use the power of the atomic editor with the current V3 Elementor, which I thought was pretty cool because now you just extended what you can do with V3. So another question some of you probably might have is, do you use a div block or a flexbox when you're working with V4? And you can absolutely use a div block and then add the same class to it, for example, section L, and it works, but you don't have a lot of controls here for the layout, which only show up if you turn it into a flexbox. Then you basically get the same settings as if you were just starting out with a flexbox. So from what I understand now, it's just the same elements. It's still one container, but this flexbox one already has the flex display selected here. That's why I use flex boxes for the backgrounds, only if I really need like a small simple box somewhere and I know it's going to be vertical, then I use the div block. But then again, I often turn it into a flex box anyways if I need this feature. So I personally don't know why Elementor created a separate widget for that, because I think it can be confusing, but it doesn't matter that much. And like I said, there's one more thing which you can do to improve the system, and that is to also turn this one into a clamp. So then you also have to go into the formula. There are many clamp generators online that you can find. Okay, let's do one together then, because I know some of you want to know this. Okay, so for this example, I wanted 5 on a desktop, right? So let's say that on a mobile, you want to go to 3.5. Then the viewport starts on mobile, and Elementor that's 360. And then this depends on the class that you're editing. So let's say that that's 1240. The root font size is 16, that's fine. So then you can copy this clamp value and then paste that here inside of the formula. So now the top and bottom padding also becomes smaller once you go to mobile. And as you can see, it takes a little bit of time to set up, but you only have to do this once, and then you can use it on every single project. So use this tutorial to set up your system, and then you can use it everywhere. And not only you, also your AI agents. If you're working with something like an MCP, then you just tell it like, hey, if there is a section that is narrow, that is very text heavy, then use my class called section S. If you want a full width layout, then use my class section L or section full, and then the agent will follow that. But without that, it's probably gonna be a mess. So I hope that you found this valuable. I think it's pretty cool. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any improvements, also let me know, and then I will see you hopefully in one of my next videos.